All right, everyone, let's do this. Welcome, everyone, to the first, and hopefully not last, Curiosity Guild. My name is Isolde. I will be your hostess this evening, and I am so happy you all came out to our debut with Bright Ideas. Weird. Everyone is invited to contribute, and if you're inspired tonight to give a talk on our stage, you can pitch anytime on our website at curiosityguild.org/speak. So if you have something that you're really passionate about, it doesn't have to be nonfiction, it must be history, shoot it our way. It will probably fit with one of our upcoming themes. Speaking of participation, here at Curiosity Guild, we are drawing inspiration from a previous history event thing. If you know, you know. So we will embrace this legacy of the audience with callbacks for our speakers. But I'm not going to prime you. I want to see what you all come up with organically tonight. So if you're like, okay, let's check. Birds! All right, that's your first callback. Steen is evergreen. So, Steen. All right, let's get on with it. That said, we have 6 fine. Thank you. About brilliant moments, shining legacies, even a shinier audacity, unconventional strokes of genius. Applaud our dazzling speakers as they light the way tonight. So tonight we will hear from Kelly Hanna, Eric White, Crystal Nanavati, Chris Stalick, me! My name is Isolde Honore, and as we delve into bright ideas tonight, I will be exploring the medieval governance of bees and the brightness they brought to medieval Irish culture. Oh, I love it. There will be so many bees. Bees contributed sweetness and light, and they were instrumental to art and oversight and regulation of bees. So let's go into a little medieval history. The medieval ages started roughly in the 1400s, and at this time, this is just when Christianity and the Latin alphabet were being introduced into Ireland. There was a very primitive system of writing, but there wasn't really an alphabet or written structure. So when monks came to Ireland, they began to record history, and they started to document the existing and very complicated and nuanced honor, status, and cooperative legal system that existed, the Brehon laws. Irish society valued agricultural holding over any kind of currency system. And as a barter-based society, their idea of value was based entirely on their most important agricultural commodity. I'm gonna let you guess what that is. I heard cattle and cows from a few people, and you are correct. The milk cow, or the milch cow, was the most valuable item of value. Cattle were not just livestock, but they were the basis of currency, wealth, law, and social relationships in Irish society. These cattle laws were very detailed and specific on how to manage cattle. These were deeply rooted in oral tradition, and these laws went back hundreds, if not thousands of years. Before the monks started writing them down. So, for example, one milch cow is worth about 3 calves, and a pregnant cow is worth about 2/3 of a milch cow, and 3 women are worth 1 milch cow. It's not a perfect system, but let's move on. After 100 years after writing came to Ireland, Christianity was widespread and monasteries became well established on the island. A couple of different Christian saints are credited with bringing honeybees to Ireland, despite honeybees already existing in Ireland. But when you write the history, you can credit yourself with a few things. It is accurate to say that monks brought this novel practice of beekeeping or apiculture to Ireland, specifically how to manage bees by housing them in skeps, which are woven dome-shaped baskets with a hole in the front. Beekeepers encouraged hives to swarm regularly so that they could have more hives contained in skeps. In very short time, honey was a valuable commodity. It's a primary sweetener. It has medicinal uses. You can make mead with it, which was vital for feasts and celebrations. And bees became so essential to agriculture and the economy that 100 years after bees were introduced, a revolutionary set of laws would be written for their oversight. So how do we develop new laws? You base them on the old ones. Because surely you can take the principles governing an old thing and apply it to the new thing, right? Because bees are just winged cows, right? It is science. Technical correction. They're a bunch of tiny winged cows. So here's the clever bit. Much of the bee laws were based on the cattle laws. Functionally, let's look at the similarities. They're both herd animals. Okay, if you're being scientific and pedantic, technically bees are a super colony, but by medieval thinking, we can agree they're kind of herd animals, right? They both require extensive grazing area and could conceivably trespass on your neighbor's land to do so. They're both livestock. Cows are big livestock. They produce meat which you can eat, milk which you can drink, and tallow which you can burn for light. Bees, on the other hand, are small livestock. They produce honey that you can eat, mead which you can drink, and beeswax which you can burn for light. Enter the Bechbretha, based on cattle law but tailored to the unique nature of bees. This had 5 sections, and all of them were delineating compensation to keep communities harmonious and balanced. For examples, I brought up trespass. If your neighbor's bees trespass to graze on your land, and you can prove it, you are compensated with 1/3 of the honey from that trespassing hive. It's all about balance and restoration. If you look at the document itself, I think this copy is from about the 1400s or 1500s. You can see that along with the main text, and also if you look at the right-hand column, there's 3 B's that says Bech, Bech, and Bich. That's Old Irish for bee. In between the main writing is tiny writing, and in the margins, this is glosses or notes, clarifications, or updates added along the way. Usually these glosses would be added to successive copies, so this law text became kind of a living evergreen document, which itself is kind of a bright idea. So speaking of bright ideas, let's look at the main way that bee judgments differ from cattle judgments. Governability. Cattle can be controlled with fences. Bees cannot be controlled with fences. The bee laws recognize this and allow for the nature of bees to be, well, bees. Cattle are fully controllable by fences, which leads to strict codes of liability. If your cattle gets out and damages something, you're liable. If your bees get out and damage something, well, they're semi-wild, so there's conditional liability. What a bee. As I mentioned, there's a whole segment of this law dealing with bee injuries. If a party is unfairly injured, they can be compensated with honey, in a few cases. However, the text acknowledged the innate nature of bees. This is one of my favorite laws, and if anyone else has a favorite medieval bee law, let's chat at intermission. So the next law I'm going to read you is kind of the F around and find out law. Among the complete immunities in bee judgments is the man on whom they have rushed when robbing them, moving them, seizing them, or looking at them over their hives at the time that they are swarming. So basically, if you are messing with bees, you should know better, and you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir. The law does not recognize your claim. These texts assume that people are familiar with the nature of bees, which they were. Beekeeping was very common, so people understood, you don't fuck with bees. You leave them alone. Now, these principles of natural law articulated in the Bechbretha did not just remain confined to legal texts, but they informed broader patterns of early Irish religious life as well. Monastic communities likewise embedded these beekeeping principles into their daily routines. Of particular importance to monks were the production and ritual use of beeswax candles. Honey and mead were kind of luxury items, and so was beeswax. Tallow candles are smoky, and they are stinky, whereas beeswax burns cleaner, sweeter, and brighter. So tallow candles were kind of for the poor, and beeswax candles were for the rich and for the clergy. The church began to use the symbolically pure beeswax exclusively. And there's this whole thing where like Christians thought that bees were virgins, so there's like, symbolism, and like the wax was like the body of Christ because it's not corruptible. Like what? It's a whole thing. Science, religion. Now, most importantly, beeswax candles gives you more hours of clean light by which you can scribe by. So this written word flourished in monastic scriptoriums. Monasteries in the Middle Ages, they were the hub of literacy, and this literacy ended up being powered by beeswax. And as an additional useful use of wax, vellum is very expensive and hard to produce. And so scribes were taught to write on tablets coated in beeswax. They could scratch out letters and then cover them and reuse this beeswax as a method to learn writing. Not only is this beeswax bringing light and enabling the written word, it's important to art too. 100 years after the introduction of bees to Ireland, Irish monasteries originate the movement of insular art, or island art, which is a very unique and highly fanciful and decorative art form blending Celtic traditions and Anglo-Saxon forms and content. And some of the finest examples of this art by the year 700 and 800 are the Lindisfarne Gospel and the Book of Kells, which you've probably heard of. So for comparison on this slide, these are both pages from the life of Matthew. So you can see there's some similar forms, but this incredible, flourishing, detailed artwork. So to just show you some of the dizzying detail, I'd like to zoom in on a random page from the Book of Kells. On this side, you can see the entire page. On the top is just a part I've zoomed in on, and I want you to look at this motif of the three birds. Do you see that? This entire page is 13 inches high, which means that this motif is smaller than a dime. So I'm going to boldly assert that a scribe could not produce this level of output or this level of fine detail without beeswax candles. And from better illumination, we get better illuminated manuscripts. So, as a brief digression, while on the subject of art, I want to talk briefly about this enduring symbolism of the skep. Has anyone heard of a beekeeping skep before tonight? A few of you may have. A few? Has anyone not heard of it? That's the confirmation bias I want. Okay, so skeps, the baskets in which bees are housed. This was the best practice in beekeeping for over 1,000 years throughout the British Isles and Europe and beyond, until 1851, when the removable frame beehive was invented. You guys have seen this, right? Like bees in cubes. This was invented by Reverend Lorenzo Lorraine Landstroth, which is quite a mouthful. And for 125 years, this has been the best practice in beekeeping. It's much healthier for the hive. You can gather honey without destroying the hive. And so this is like 6 or 7 human generations that we've had bees in cubes. However, we still have this legacy and this skep shape ingrained in our cultural consciousness that bees are not cubes. Bees are domes. So you may be asking, if skeps but they don't exist anymore, so honey is not skep-shaped, right? Well, look at how we house honey. And even those weird, drippy, drizzly things, I'm sure there's a word for them, they're also based on the shape of a skep. Oh, okay. If you're still skeptical about it, thank you. I'm here all night. Why? Even yellow copyrighted honey-loving bears and other cartoons show skep-shaped hives, when in reality, wild hives are not dome-shaped at all. All right, that's really it. So while skeps are not used in contemporary beekeeping any longer, they do persist in our bee iconography. So even medieval beekeeping can retain cultural and symbolic endurance. So let's bring it back to close the loop to medieval art and manuscripts. So I'll end on this note and this frankly adorable illustration from the Aberdeen Bestiary. This kind of illustration and this kind of shared, there's a whole article that's very inaccurate about bees in the Aberdeen Bestiary. So this kind of written knowledge about bees was made possible by the very products of bees themselves. So if you're excited about a thing, for me, I got really excited this month about bees. Come talk to me at intermission about it. So I encourage you all to dive into those like weird research and rare histories and find inspiration in the many forms of illumination preserved in our past. So tonight I'd like to raise a glass and toast the sweetness and light of bees. They were bringers of scholarship and art, and also a toast to the scholars who kept their laws and histories alive.